Hello, everyone. My name is Padmini Nidumolu, and I'm the co-founder of Lean and Agile for Women. And this initiative is for women to come together and support each other, lean into each other, offer to the group, and seek from the group. And this video that you're watching today is part of Lean and Agile 100, also known as LIA100 initiative. And this initiative is primarily brought to you to celebrate and recognize the journeys of 100 phenomenal and inspiring women thought leaders in our Lean and Agile communities. Today, I'm absolutely honored to introduce you to a fearless leader who is not sorry for her many biases, including strong preferences for servant-style leadership and team-based holistic problem solving, and a strong aversion to agile zealotry. Whether consulting or in-house, she endeavors to make life suck less for software delivery organizations and the humans who inhabit them. She leverages agile and lean principles to successfully plan and execute, I love this, weddings, house moves, world travel, and much more. If only many of us can do that. And in fact, her colleagues and clients call her an agent of chaos because she delights them with upending conventional wisdom and showing people a new way to think about and love their everyday work. And we need more of such people. And if the usual in your organization has not worked for you or for your organization, call her. She's none other than Cheryl Hammond. Please join me in welcoming Cheryl Hammond. Hi, Cheryl. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, Padmini. Thank you so much for having me. It is such an honor to be in this group.
Absolutely. It's an honor to have you, Cheryl. All right, so jumping right in, and we have a time box here, and I have so many things to ask you. So you work with several teams and organizations and in coaching and training spaces. And from my introduction, the viewers probably are curious, what does the usual mean? And when should they call you? When should we call you?
I think oftentimes in Agile, we focus so much on the details of our processes and getting things right. And I like to look at the assumptions underneath and the passion and the excitement that we have for why we do this job in the first place. I recently gave a talk where I talked about being an Agile coach in an industry where you could look around the desks of the people who worked there, and some of them would be stacked with coding books, but others of them had model airplanes. And you could tell that these were the people who they work for this organization because they're super passionate about flight and what it means to them, and they want to support it with their coding knowledge. And it's that excitement and joy that I think reminds us, we're here to put, people in the sky in aluminum tubes. And the software that we write is to do an awesome job of doing that. And how do we dig in and bring that enthusiasm to processes that can be kind of flat and rote if we just do them the same way every 2 weeks?
Right. And since you mentioned the passion, since you mentioned, some are different than the others in the teams around you. Mm-hmm. And some of that could be a result of the internal barriers or external mm-hmm. barriers. And in your experience, what are some of those barriers that were hard for these teams to break, mm-hmm. No matter how much they try? And what kind of mindset did you bring in as a catalyst, mm-hmm. Or a coach or a leader?
I think it's really, the ones that I think are potentially the most impactful are where we've created internal barriers or imaginary barriers where our own assumptions are holding us back. I was just talking with folks about one of the anti-patterns in a Scrum retrospective that I struggle with. And I've seen it in so many places, and it's just common that you'll end up doing the traditional retrospective where you talk about what went well in the last 2 weeks, and then you talk about what could be better. And it's such a common pattern to see teams who put all stickies up that describe things that other people could be doing better, things that they wish would change in the organization. And these are legit, right? These are real issues that are really things the teams struggle with. Might be the same one, sprint after sprint after sprint. But I watch for and I catch when teams are describing things that they themselves can't, they're framing it in a way that they can't do anything about that thing. It's outside of them. It's some manager. There's a they, and the they need to do this thing to remove this impediment. Even, they might even lean real heavily on a scrum master and say, it's your job to go clear impediments, go clear this them that's holding us back. And something that I always try to do in those scenarios is to challenge the team to say, okay, fine, pick this thing that's really impactful. What are we going to do about this thing? And the first answer is frequently, we can't do anything about it because that's a senior management decision. And I say, yes, and what are we going to do to make that thing suck less while we wait? What are we going to do to protect ourselves from that thing? What are we going to do to cope with that thing? And if you dig into it, sometimes the answer is we need to go out for beers once a week and just drown our sorrows because we can't change that thing. But if we challenge the teams, oftentimes we can say, well, you know, if it's this meeting that's sucking up all the team's time, what if we send a delegate instead of sending the whole team? If it's this misunderstanding of the backlog, what if we have somebody who has influence with the product owner to sit down and talk with it? You know, what can we do? Because we are the they.
Yes.
And how do we make that happen? I see really exciting changes happen in teams when they start to realize that they don't need to wait. They can take action themselves right away, even if they can't fix the underlying problem, to make it impact their team differently. Right. And to change the way their everyday work affects them. That makes their lives better right away without needing to wait for a manager's permission. It's really moving sometimes.
Yeah. And I love what you said. We are the they. And I think we versus they is probably, you know, the biggest gap that we see, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
Right. It's that barrier is we sometimes forget to claim our own power. And the talk that we do as women in Agile oftentimes is around that, recognizing, you know, defeating imposter syndrome. There are so many great thoughts that we have in the Women in Agile community that when we take them back to an organization, we say, wait a minute, what do you mean you don't think you can do that yourself? Of course you can. Right. And we can make some really impactful change.
Sure. Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. And when you talk about power, when you talk about, you know, claiming that power, right? I also, you know, in my introduction, I was mentioning that you talk quite a bit about Strengths Finder, and you use it, you leverage it, you know, for various different, analysis, or, you know, you use it as a tool to kind of bring people together. Now, based on that, what do you think that we women can hold on to from strengths perspective, not just to survive, not just to thrive, but to persist in this VUCA world? Because, you know, all of us need those, you know, strengths.
For me, the most valuable thing about the Strengths Finder assessment, really, like so much else in Agile, is the mindset that you can promote with it. The idea that we are not growing by remediating our deficiencies. We're not looking for the places where we fail and trying to drag ourselves up, but we are looking for, what do we already bring? What do we already provide that is a unique contribution to our teams? And how can we expand and grow in the areas where we are already strong? Because when we do that, it feels better, it feels empowering, and it reminds us every minute that we are doing it that we're worthy of that, that we did bring something that allows us to be here. It's the best antidote for imposter syndrome that I've ever experienced, is to just be reminded, I am different from those around me. I am successful and came to this place by a path that is not the same. And that's okay. That's not just okay, but is correct and is awesome. And so how can I be successful by being more like myself instead of trying to be more like somebody else?
Yeah.
And the more that we model that behavior, again, this is something that flows out to everyone around us, whether it's other women in Agile, or even, surprisingly, I spend time with men where I see, them struggling with anxiety and imposter syndrome and the stresses that our modern work life places on human beings. And it's
Right.
very cool to have certain insights that we've developed by having to be women and struggle in this industry that we can then share back to help everybody.
That is really very profound what you just mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
So make or enhance ourselves to be more of ourselves than comparing ourselves to others. I think that's a very profound advice you've really shared. Thank you so much. I would like to change the gears here. I also know that you are a conference chair, a track chair. You're a conference speaker, and you've been associated with Agile Alliance, for some time now. And one of the pillars of Lean and Agile is conference partnership, organizational partnership, where we are raising awareness and bringing awareness on how can conferences or any gatherings for that matter in Lean and Agile spaces, how can they create and announce space which is explicitly dedicated for diversity, right? And there is power in announcing that we do have space, come seek, come reach out. So in your experience, what are some of the patterns in diversity, both in gender and thought leadership? It's not all about gender, but even in thought leadership that you have seen while you, as a track chair, receive the proposals, review the proposals, and just talk to various speakers. What was it like?
I think for me, the number one thing to understand about creating diverse spaces is that we're not taking white male spaces and benevolently opening them up for
Sure.
other people to come and do in the way that they were originally designed by these less diverse folks, no matter how good their intentions were. But
Right.
what I mean by that is when we open up a space and make it a truly diverse community, we would expect to see fundamental elements of that space become transformed, be changed into something that those of us who've been there for years might recognize differently or not recognize. And we should expect a little discomfort with what some of those changes look like,
Sure.
because we are bringing in new perspectives that I didn't go to that conference possessing. I am inviting other folks to come in and share with me. A great example would be that Agile is practiced differently in other parts of the world. We could talk about the differences between Western thought patterns and Eastern thought patterns.
Right.
And I would expect to be challenged and to be looking at my role as a coach differently. I may or may not, I live in the West, I work in mainly Western corporations. I'm going to learn something that's going to be useful and interesting to me that's different. If I don't figure out how to create an opening for that, because I don't know what I don't know, right? Typical journey of a coach, then I don't get the benefits of really being challenged. So it is a struggle for conferences, but it's a worthy struggle to try to figure out how do we create space for those things that we don't expect, and for people and voices that initially are confusing or different, feel too different for us, right? So we want to change our community. Wait, not like that. and how do we get ourselves over that to make space for us to really sit with that discomfort and grow?
Right.
And that can look like different formats for workshops, or people asking different questions, or that doesn't feel like an Agile conference topic, or some really cool kind of boundary pushing stuff that we can do. And as we do that, we're inviting in people with really different perspectives who then have something to share and can feel good about the fact that they're contributing something that's really moving the community as a whole.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I think, that's very important. And I see the emerging trend in conferences in that direction more and more than past 5 years.
Absolutely.
So I think good times are definitely in future. And you also served as a mentor to one of the, I think, new voices,
Right.
program in Women in Agile. Based on your experience, and you've been a mentor to a protege, do you see an emerging trend in this space where women are seeking to speak more, share their stories, coming out and not being apprehensive or intimidated as much than it was 5 years ago? What's the trend looking like?
What I see is I still hear echoes of how I felt 10, 12 years ago when I was an aspiring speaker and before I had really started on my journey to participation in conferences. I speak to sort of newer to the community women in my job and at some of the smaller conferences that I attend, where folks will say to me, I'm really interested in being a conference speaker, but I just don't know what I have to talk about.
Right.
And I remember being that person. I remember saying those exact words. And it was finally when I had the opportunity to work as a consultant a little bit, and something that dawned on me, and this is a thing that I now hand down to, it's advice I give to others, is as coaches, we are frequently in explaining, trying to explain ideas, new ideas to people in organizations in order to get them to be able to do a thing that they couldn't do before, or to maybe adjust a behavior to deliver a better result. And what I realized was there were a couple of things. I think my example was around unit testing. Right, I was trying to move the needle in organizations to promote test-driven development and the value of unit testing. And I have a dev background, so that was meaningful to me. And what I found was that I would sit and have a chat with somebody who had been resistant to that idea, and I would get feedback from them saying, I've never heard anybody explain it that way before. And I realized, okay, unit testing is not a new topic at conferences. It's done to death still today.
Right.
But part of the reason it's still done is because organizations still struggle with it. So if I have a new take on it, if I'm able to explain it in a way that resonates with people, perhaps that is useful to a larger crowd, and I can test that by writing a proposal and seeing if the conference finds it valuable. And then I can test it further if I get selected to speak by getting feedback from the audience and saying, not just, did you enjoy this talk, but do you think you can use some of the ideas out of this talk, and refining those, right? So the opportunity to start at smaller conferences and to work our way up and iterate based on feedback, all of this is stuff that folks in the Agile community can use. Yeah. So what I'm seeing trend-wise is I definitely see more women speaking up and saying, I am interested, I want to go on this journey, I am looking for support and help in doing it. And it's so fascinating to me that there are still those same questions that I remember from years ago, but that we have a way as a community to try to help women answer them and to get themselves on board much more quickly than I did when I was, their age.
Absolutely. And especially with the framework, the support framework we have today, I think, that's definitely realized. And one more thing that's very prominent on your profile, Cheryl, is, and even before that, let me take a step back. One of the pillars of LIA100 and Lean and Agile in general is called the LIA Next Gen. It is next generation, and our vision is to bring next generation, blending into Lean and Agile organizations, to share with them and mentor them on growth mindset, value of transparency, and value and the emphasis on people element in the organizations, because it's just a whole new generation. And you are the director of college counseling for Mind Matters, the local chapter, right?
That's right.
And you work extensively with high school students, counseling and whatnot. What are some of the trends and observations you've seen in the next generation, especially in that lean mindset, growth mindset, ability to communicate with each other freely?
I love that you've asked this question, because it gives me a chance to talk about the great work that Minds Matter does. We're a national nonprofit, and we're focused on working with low-income and first-generation high school students in large cities around the country, helping them to broaden their dreams and prepare for success in college. And they do this by a program of 3 years of working with our volunteer mentors. I've been really privileged to be able to work with the senior classes over the last several years here in Seattle. And something that's clearly a trend is that so many young people understand that the value of getting into a STEM field, or, and certainly in Seattle, the visibility of careers in computer science is pretty significant. And many young folks who are the first in their families to even consider college are
Yeah.
seeing that this is a path not just to changing their own lives personally, but really to raising up their entire family, right? To building a life for their community. I have kids that are talking about going into medicine and how they plan to give back. So it's inspiring to be able to work with them. I think what's also great is that, you know, when you're a kid in 10th grade and you're thinking ahead to computers seem like a thing, and that's about all you know,
Yeah.
you don't get, and folks in schools would have no way of knowing this, the great richness of career paths that are open to us when we get into technology in the field in general. I've mentioned that I started out as a developer. I would never have imagined that I was going to become a consultant, advising Fortune 500 organizations at an executive level. I wouldn't have thought that that was going to be a path. I didn't actually think I was going to get into tech at all. I didn't major in computer science, but here I am. And being able to talk to young people about the different ways that they can contribute. As a consultant at a large organization that prided itself on not liking consultants, somebody once gave me the feedback that, oh, the reason this works must be because you have a college background in anthropology. And that must be why you're so effective as a technical consultant. And I said, well, yeah, I care a lot about corporate culture and understanding culture and how to work within a culture. And that's a perspective that somebody with a master's in computer science doesn't bring, but I do.
Right.
And so talking to kids about how the specific thing they major in is not determinative. They may be able to do more broadly, things like I do, but also to be able to say, as you're majoring in computer science and getting that depth of technical skill that can also be really valuable, there are careers in user-centered design. There are careers in lean product management that could allow you to take skills that you possess more broadly and apply them in ways to make a difference in the organization you work for and in the world, much, much beyond your computer monitor. And this is something where it opens up the world of technology to young people in a way that is much broader and, just much more catalyzing, I think, than just the idea of I'm going to sit and code. Some people love to sit and code. That's what they dream of doing, but that you can have an impact in the world through technology in a lot of other ways.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it is such a far-reaching and value-added activity. And, I would like to congratulate you for doing that, because it's a true give back to the community and something which has a far-reaching effect and impact on the next generation. Thanks for doing that. Can you share a pivotal moment or a situation or an experience in your journey so far?
I talk about this at some of the companies that I've worked for in the past and at some of my clients, where in my early career, I worked in the public sector, and I actually had fairly recently entered the technology field just before, I'll be dating myself here, just before the end of the last century's big .com crash, right? Everything collapsed out from under us. And the joke here in Seattle was the percentage of web developers that ended up going back to being baristas. And I found myself in a position where I had a reasonable amount of job security where I was at in the public sector. And it was a job that was really difficult to do just situationally. We weren't set up to succeed. We had real struggles with management. We had just kind of a fairly hostile work environment and almost any frustration that you can name about being a not very empowered junior developer on a development team. And a bunch of us banded together, and we would talk about these challenges at lunch, and we would help each other look for other jobs. And for many years after the bubble collapsed, there really weren't other jobs. And what we realized was a couple of things. We weren't going to be able to go anywhere else. Thankfully, in the public sector, they weren't laying off in large numbers yet. So we had a reasonable amount of security where we were. But if we didn't figure out how to get some kind of success out of our project was likely to be canceled, and we didn't like what was going to happen to us if that occurred.
Yeah.
And so we really had to focus in on our team, and it became clear that we were not going to get help from management. If they knew how to help us, they didn't all want to. And it really forced us to consider forms of resilience and forms of determination and ways of getting things done by influence and by honestly sneaking around and asking for forgiveness instead of permission. and doing things to make the boss look good even when the boss really didn't deserve it. Because that was good for our team. It was good for the health of our team.
Right.
And it kept us all housed, it kept us all in paychecks. And it was that kind of, like, when I go to a client and they say, oh, well, my manager's not cooperative or not supportive, I'm like, bring it, honey. Like, tell me another one, because I've been there. I have fought this. I have fought under worse circumstances. And it created for me a real sense of determination that I will find a way. I will find a way around this obstacle. I will find a way to minimize the impact of this problem. And we may not be able to ship the thing that I dream of. We may not be able to ship the thing that I see the potential, and if only. That may not be attainable, but we will, by God, ship something. Right. And I like being able to take that to teams and encourage them to look within. Right? Look at what you can do. Look at what you can do by founding your own little rebel alliances. And if you need to be successful in spite of your organization, then do it. There are ways to make that happen. And so I feel like that one, set of, like, that one team and project of incredible frustration, I think, built in me this great determination to just be so stubborn and wear down the organization until we manage to make something happen. In a way that is, I guess, not something that I see from people who haven't had that same experience, right? When it was really like, yeah, I'm not going to have a place to live unless I figure this out. And I'm going to, by gosh, figure this out. That I think was pretty formative for me.
Yeah. And I'm pretty sure because of the strength you mustered to kind of, thrive in that situation, kind of carried on and resulted in where you are today.
It becomes a part of me, right? And so now I'm a pain in the butt for every manager that I've ever had after that. They've all been super nice, but they all kind of suffer from that what that first one turned me into, and I like to think that I have I've smoothed off the rough edges, and I'm able to now be a partner to the manager, but in ways that can be pretty provocative.
Sure. Yeah. Whatever it takes to kind of, make the transformation happen and sustain this happen. Awesome. So, you've shared all these learnings and your experiences. So what are some of the learning resources you can share with us? It could be books, podcasts, authors, conferences, anything, right? If you can name a few.
Right. I'm really one of those people who, almost anybody else that you ask this question will rattle off a list of the awesome books that they've read and make me feel kind of dumb. But how I best learn, and I always have, is by physically placing myself in a community, going to a conference, attending a class. And I'm terrible in a class. I'm not very focused or very attentive, but where I get the value is in discussion sections and in what we call the hallway conference. Some of the very best learnings that I've had were, I'm thinking back to 12, 13 years ago when I would go to local conferences and literally stalk the speakers in the coffee line and ask them a question about their talk and get back something that was very personalized to the way that I was asking, or I could follow up with them, or even just going to a birds of a feather session and sitting and listening to how other people argued with each other. And thinking, well, how do I want to engage with that? I'm not ready to jump in and get my feet wet yet, but if I were, what might I have to say about that?
Right.
And, and just being in the company of the smart people who elevate us and who challenge us and say, well, I read in this thing, well, I read in this other thing, and being able to have that, that mixing of ideas. I get the most, like that just, it accelerates my growth for a couple of weeks every year. In these ways that I can't bottle that magic and take it home with me. I do read books and I love pulling in things from outside of our industry. So the usual stuff like I own the Patrick Lencioni box set. He's the 5 Dysfunctions of a Team guy. Love all of his other books. They're easy reads. I've seen, like, there's a book, Peak, by Chip Conley, that talks about using Maslow's hierarchy of needs to understand how to better serve our employees and our customers and our investors. And I loved being able to take that framework, which comes from outside of Agile, and apply it in a way that helps me understand how to solve Agile problems.
Yeah.
Right? So things like that. There's some speakers on our circuit that are trained in other professions. There's some that have advanced degrees in psychology or sociology, and they are able to bring in techniques from outside of Agile. And I love the freshness that gives us whenever we have an opportunity to incorporate some of those ideas.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you, right? And I'm of the same, school of thought, come from the same school of thought, where the hallway conferences are the most valuable. I learn more from networking and conferences more than the speakers that are, standing in front of the room. So, totally resonate that. So
I think I was in my mid to late 30s when I realized that standing and talking to a speaker in the coffee line is networking. I was like, oh my God, that's networking? That's really easy. I thought I didn't know how to do networking, but it's just going to a place and talking to people. Like, I can totally do that.
Yeah, and then that is so rich, right, in
Yeah.
experience and learning. Yeah, that's a very different way of looking at learning. Great. So as we wrap up, what would be a message or a phrase or a quote that you want to share? And I love these, wrap up lines because that just sums it up.
Right. I don't know if I have it concisely in a sentence, but I think it's really, for me, it's really about having confidence in who you are and being the most you that you can be when you show up at your work or with your clients, and realizing that they may have had other Agile coaches, but they've never had a you. And your experiences and your background and your knowledge and who you know and who you read are going to give you a perspective that they've never encountered before. And you should, revel in that. That's what's going to enable you to make a difference that nobody before you was able to make.
Love that. Be more of you. Awesome. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Cheryl. This was, just a whole world of experience and knowledge you've shared with us.
Thank you so much.
It's an honor. It's an absolute honor to have you as, in fact, first 25 of our LIA100, and spending this kind of time and your willingness to just spend this time with us. Thank you so much.
I really appreciate it. I have to say, probably even 5 years ago, I would never have dreamed of my name being in the company of some of the amazing women that are in your top 25. It feels extraordinary to be part of that group. And it's something that I want anybody who's out there who is thinking, my name's not in the LIA100, but in a few years, it could be. Like, I really did not see myself making a journey where I would be anybody that anybody'd ever heard of. And It's been very cool to have that opportunity. But it just, to me, it really is. If somebody like me can do it, really, any of us who aspire to it can make that happen. It's very exciting. Thank you so much.
I love that message that, if not this time, a few years down the line, every woman will be celebrated.
Darn right.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you so much, Cheryl. I look forward to talking to you soon.